The accountant who turned into a great country politician, Barnaby Joyce. He's a former deputy PM who's often as entertaining as he is devoted to his country. But have we seen the last of his ambitions? We will find out tonight.
What a load of rubbish. What an absolute load of pig manure. He's going to reach out to you.
Why?
He's going to reach out to the coal mines. Don't worry, fellas. We're reaching out to you.
Here's a rumour. I've heard that the member for Sydney wants the leader of the opposition's job. Here's a rumour. There's only one party to vote for if you want the tax. You.
Barnaby Joyce has been starring on the political stage for 15 years now. We've seen him cross the floor in the John Howard years, take on Turnbull over a carbon tax rise to the top of the National Party and fight hard for farmers' rights and economic stability. But he's a make-it-or-break-it politician, Barnaby Joyce, who's never too far away from a little bit of controversy. He's on our line right now in Canberra. Barnaby Joyce, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome, Chris.
Now, listen, I should get to the hard questions, the meaty questions first. When we saw you change that nappy on Channel 7 several months ago, was that just bunged on for the cameras, or are you really changing nappies?
Yeah, no, I'm really happy. Like, with the boys, it's really important. If there's one thing that you learn is you really treasure that moment when your kids are young, and you try to make sure you've got space for them, and you try to make sure you're involved with their lives. You know, probably the mistake I made in the past, Chris, is so ambitious and so busy that I wasn't at home as much as I should be, especially for maybe the younger girls, because I was out trying to save the world and fight to get ahead, and not at home. So yeah, I enjoy it.
Okay, so you are changing nappies. Is that a yes or a no?
That's a definite yes. I mean, obviously not all the time. As, I'd be lying to say, oh well, I'm first point of call for a poo. But I'm definitely a backup.
That's good. Is it tougher second time round? Because there are a lot of dads out there who are second timers, and they either say it's easier because you've learnt from the first time, or you've got your act together in your own career so you can devote more time, or they say it's really, really harder.
I think you're more mature about it, and yeah, you certainly treasure it more. And you're right. There are a lot of people out there who are in their 50s or late 40s who are having kids for the first time. You see, or the second time, you see that quite often now. The world's a different place. We live for a lot longer, so it's not as extraordinary. But it is a little like, as I always try to explain to people, you can watch a game of football when you're 50 and think, yeah, oh gosh, I remember when I did that and I'd love to play again. But if you get on the paddock, it's a different story.
6 children you have now. Is there any plan for any more? Because you did grow up on that property outside of Tamworth. There were 6 at Woodbrook, right?
That's correct. That's right, Danglema, there's 6 there. And I always wanted 6 kids, strangely enough, and now I've got them, and probably not the way I thought it was going to happen, but it's great, and having the girls, which I love dearly, and the boys, which I love dearly, is great. And they both come into the world and contribute to the world in different ways, and that's what I do notice. There is a difference between girls and boys. They're not better, they're not worse, but they're certainly different in their approach to the world. Yeah,
exactly. As someone who has always said to me in various interviews, how much you detest debt and how we've got to make sure that we can, run the economy the way it should be run, not the way it may have been run in the past. This must be doing your head in, the fact that we have ventured down the path of stimulus to the tune of $320 billion.
No. It does do my head in. You got to remember, for your audience, back in 2010, I got booted from my job as Shadow Finance Minister because I had the temerity to suggest, as we went from $80 billion to $100 billion, that if we didn't get off this trajectory, we would not be able to pay our debt back. And it wasn't the size of our debt, but it was the trajectory, how quickly it was increasing that was a problem.
Yeah.
Well, now in 2020, we haven't paid any of that debt back, and it's 7 times and more bigger. And the trajectory is continuing on. And people say, we'll get to $1 trillion. And you say, well, why would it stop there? What magical thing's going to happen at $1 trillion apart from a different number, rather starting with a B, starts with a T? It'll just continue on. And there's got to be something dramatic. Both sides of politics, our side and the other side, have to say to the Australian people how they intend to repay it. And I haven't heard that. Now, if the malady is hard to diagnose, it's easy to cure. And that was back in 2010. Hard to diagnose, all the wise sages coming to the Senate sniggering, all the people from Treasury sniggering, silly Barney. Well, they were wrong. The problem was right. What I got wrong was I thought it would end up at about $500 billion by now. It's $750 billion and racing towards $1 trillion. Well, there it was hard to diagnose, easy to cure. Now it's very easy to diagnose and hard to cure. And the problem's going to be for your children. And because, when they talk about, we'll repay it, 2041 or 2061, how absurd. What about the wars, the GFCs, the recessions, the pandemics that are going to happen between now and then? What's our plan?
Yeah, it's very true. And you're right. Your 6 kids, who I've just mentioned, are the ones who will be punished the most because they won't have the same job opportunities. It'll cost them more to get into the housing market. There will be so many, lesser opportunities in life, and you can't see that sort of stuff. It's not visually in front of you. People in hospital is in front of you, but we don't see the cost on the other side of the ledger, do we?
Oh, yeah, Chris, and it's so frustrating. People say, it had to happen, and because there's some virtuous reason for the debt, therefore they sort of imply that you don't have to repay it. If you have a credit card, a $20,000 credit card, and buy $20,000 worth of Panadol because you need it, doesn't matter. You still got to pay it back. Yes. You still got to fix it up. You can't go on with that on your credit card and say, but it was for a virtuous cause. Well, this might be for a virtuous cause. And it was unforeseen. Well, the GFC was unforeseen. Depressions were unforeseen. This was unforeseen. A war's unforeseen. There are unforeseen things. The only thing you can foresee is that unforeseen things are going to happen. And I tell you what, they then say, after the Second World War, the debt was higher. After the Second World War, the highest marginal tax rate was 90 cents in the dollar.
Yeah.
After the Second World War, they still had death duties. After the Second World War, they locked in interest rates on the bonds they'd lent to people at a low interest rate and then kicked inflation along. So they basically devalued people's investments that they had in the bank. There's a lot of things that happened after the war in trying to pay back the debt that if you suggested, maybe this is down the path for you in the future. Maybe they'll bring back death duties. Maybe they'll have a 90% tax rate. Maybe they'll say your house is no longer capital gains tax free when you sell it. They're going to have to do something to raise the revenue to pay it back. Because the only other alternative, and this is what they did do after the war, they started building the Snowy Mountain scheme and actually made our economy bigger and stronger. But we should be building the Bradfield scheme or doing some major infrastructure that actually makes our economy bigger. If your argument is the economy is going to be bigger and that's how we're going to pay it back, which is not happening at the moment.
Yeah, it's really interesting because a lot of our older viewers would remember the earth-shattering changes in society, the projects, as you say, Snowy Mountains, and what we did on the farm and how agriculture boomed to get us out of the problems that we had post the Second World War. We are not in any condition to show our kids how the government or how the country will get up on its feet from this. And I think people expect it to just happen, but it won't happen, will it?
Nothing just happens. Cakes don't just bake themselves. Debts just don't pay themselves off. There's no magic out there.
So, Barnaby, what do we need to do? Let's cut to the chase. What do we need to do in terms of big ticket numbers to make the difference, to take us and rebound out of this chasm that we're in at the moment?
Well, the first thing is you have to stop spending so much money and you have to wheel that right in and have the discussion with the Australian people has going to be a tightening of what we're spending so your children don't have to pay it back. Next thing you have to, if you're going to spend money, you have to build on the infrastructure projects that actually make the nation stronger. So the conceit and giggles that happen by saying we'll take the water from the north and start moving it to the south and expanding your agricultural economy all the way through, you've got to stop giggling and start doing it. You've got to remove these conceits. We're not going to export coal. Mate, you got no choices. You're going to export what makes money. And if that's asparaguses, you're going to export asparaguses. If coal's making you money, you're going to be exporting coal. If iron ore's making you money, you're going to be exporting iron ore. If uranium's making you money, you're exporting uranium. You've got to go into your economy and say, well, what is our strategic advantage? It's not cheap wages. We have some of the dearest in the world. It's not commodity prices because they're on a world-based price. it used to be energy prices.
Yes.
We used to have the cheapest energy in the world. We no longer have that. Now we've got the dearest energy in the world. And why? Because we can't say the word coal-fired power, and we can't have nuclear power, and we don't want to extract gas. Well, once more, fellas, those days are gone. You've got to just open up your economy so that you are strong, so your children have a chance.
Yeah.
And that's not the total solution, Chris. That's just a tiny little part of a major policy restructure that is going to be required if you're going to honour your kids by saying, I'm not going to leave this all for you to fix up.
Really interesting. I want to go back to a younger Barnaby Joyce. Is it true that at one stage when you were a young bloke and talking to your father and your grandfather about the things that, I guess, annoyed them about the way the country was being run, that was the time that you decided you wanted to be the Prime Minister? Is that right?
Yeah, well, yes, certainly that was maybe a step too far, being the Prime Minister. I was acting Prime Minister for a couple of days.
Yes.
But, so, which was great. But I think that in the land, in a big family, as you mentioned, I was one of 6 kids. You grew up around their dining room table for Sunday lunch, Sunday roast, and the discussion inevitably went to politics, and overwhelmingly by my father, with us all listening. But it was one of all the problems. And the problems we had were always attached to a political issue. Roads weren't fixed. That was government. There were too many strikes on at that stage, very militant industrial environment. That was the government's fault. Our exports weren't getting over efficiently, government's fault. And so all these issues were connected to government policy. And so I suppose it influenced me to say, well, then the solution is to be involved in that process and get to your highest level possible so you can start dealing with this. And that frustration remained with me from primary school on. And I used to get so annoyed with people who'd say, oh, this is a problem and that's a problem, as I do even today. And I said, well, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
What's your involvement? What political party have you joined? The Greens, the Labor Party, the National Party, whatever party, Liberal Party, get involved or don't complain. They're your 2 choices.
Yeah, it's easy from the cheap seats. But is it true that you ended up being a nightclub bouncer instead, Barnaby?
For pubs. Let's get our levels right. But not my most glorious days, and not something I actually particularly proud about. But when you're working on the land and you need a break, and I was fit and playing footy, to go into town and to work at a pub, and that was the job I had, gave you a bit of a break. Here's a tip: if you're going to try and sort out all your problems with your hands, you're going to lose your teeth. So rather use your teeth to do the talking, and try and rationalise with people. It's a lot easier life that way.
That's a good tip. That's a good tip. And then you decided to move from your accountancy office in St George and become a politician. Was there a sliding doors moment that made you do that?
Well, all the way through, and I have to also acknowledge Natalie and the girls in this. I took huge risks. I left New South Wales basically without a penny, went to Queensland and started a life. Then whilst I was there, I went out Western Queensland for the company I was working for, which was a huge risk. And then the company I was working for, actually, once I started getting ahead and going quite well in it, I resigned and started my own business without any clients in a new town, without any furniture, without anything. That insanity when I look back on it. And then I built up that business so that we had, I think it was 3 or 4 accountants and staff there. And then lo and behold, I let it all go and went to politics, started again from the bottom.
Why?
And once I got to the top in the Senate, because I wanted to have effect. I was really driven by having effect. And then once I got into the Senate and I got to the top of my game, leader of the Senate, I resigned, became unemployed again, moved all the way back down to New South Wales and stood for a seat where the guy had a 23% margin. How people put up with me whilst I was doing that, God only knows. But I don't know. If you take a risk, you get there, I suppose.
You make your own luck. Was the victory over Tony Windsor in 2016 your greatest victory?
We had a couple. The first one in 2013, he was campaigning until, I believe, our numbers were ahead of his, and then obviously he got ill, and so he heard. Then he got better and came back. That's part of the... I don't concentrate that much on Mr Windsor. I concentrate on the people of New England. I was always really disappointed. If there was one thing, I was disappointed how, as a person who had held so much respect in the electorate, he really sort of descended into this sort of dark morass of bitterness and anger, and you'd see it on tweets and things that just shouldn't be said about other people, and for whatever reason he thought that they were worthwhile saying. God only knows. But it was really sad to see basically the destruction of himself by himself. Yeah, he was. It was nasty in the extreme, and I think we all detected that. I want to skip forward to now. There's a bit of talk this week about a possible challenge to Michael McCormack for the National Party. Is this coming from John Barilaro? Is this coming from Barnaby Joyce? Is this coming from a third party? Or is Michael McCormack the best man to lead the National Party? This is how far I've fallen. I found out about that whilst going through my phone, lying in bed, and I went, holy dooly, look at this. So I've got no idea where it's coming from, but it's obviously coming from someone reputable. I mean, you're not going to get a respected paper and a senior journalist writing a story unless it's not a case of smoke. But it's not you. They've seen the fire. No, it's not me. Okay. It's not me. And I've said, I've said that I support a McCormack Morrison government. Yeah. I've tried to emphasise that. I've tried to glam it up and say, this will be the best Western movie of all time. This new Western movie with the star McCormack Morrison, because you're trying to put it out there that it's okay. That's how I want the coalition to win. Okay, but what's Michael McCormack done to deserve your loyalty? What's Michael McCormack done to deserve to lead the party? Well, what the coalition has done, which he is a crucial part of as the Deputy Prime Minister, is to give our nation some of the key things that I think we needed. And I fought for things such as Dungowan Dam, we've got it. To continue on with programs such as the Inland Rail, which, to be quite frank, in the previous coalition agreement with Malcolm Turnbull, I got, and I want to make sure that that is built. Decentralisation, the Regional Investment Corporation, to make sure that that is maintained, to continue our roads recovery, which I know he's doing, to continue the mobile phone tower rollout, which I know he's doing. These are things that are important for country people, and I want to make sure that that program, whether it's decentralisation, continues on. Okay. He's got to do it. The responsibility resides with him, and these things must happen. But all you have to do is listen to you over the past 16 minutes, and people will look at where you are on the backbench and say, what a complete waste of a great politician. And you get this all the time. Well, I'm not saying for 1 second that, I relish being on the backbench, and that's foolish for anyone to say. So your ambitions are not finished? Where you have the most effect. So your ambitions are not finished? I'll always want to make sure. There's a thing, I think it's in East Sale, it says accept responsibility, it's a motto. And what it says, if responsibility is offered to you, you take it and you do the very best you can with it to help the people that you obviously believe you're competent enough to do, otherwise you wouldn't be in this building. Yeah. That is something. So if responsibility was offered to me, obviously I'd take it. But if you said, I'm out there campaigning for Michael's job, I'm not. But someone is, and that's for them to try and work it out. I'll go. Someone out there, and I'll tell you one thing about them, and I was talking to Vicky about this, whoever it is, they're telling you they're not doing it. So good luck. And that's the same with every political party. Every political party. Of course.